What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and today we're going to take a quick look at my top picks for Universal Consoles. Requirements on these are basically they have to be good activatables. So we're not going to be looking at consoles that are good, that just have good passive abilities, but consoles that you click on and are going to boost or cause a good amount of extra damage for your build. Most of these consoles are going to be based around energy weapons builds, but some of them are also going to have use case scenarios that will cover pretty much any kind of build at all, and we'll take a closer look at those and see how those synergize with other things. So let's go ahead and jump right on into it here, and I got them all pulled up. We're going to go through them one by one. The first two are going to start on more of a budget kind of level. So the first one here is going to be the enhanced induction coils. This comes off the Machella. What is that? That is a bird of prey. You can get this ship for free with a Klingon recruit. You can unlock it and then unlock it account wide. As long as you have a KDF character that is level 65, you can have cross-faction flyability, or you can also buy that unlock in the store. So the reason that this is good, and this is pretty good across the board, it also synergizes with some other consoles, is that this is going to give you a boost to all of your main energy pools, with the exception of shields. So you can use this console every 1 minute, so the recharge time on it is very quick, and if you're using something like unconventional systems where you can cool down universal consoles faster, you're going to be able to use this every 30 seconds or so, which is going to keep this up almost 100% of the time. So it runs for 30 seconds for your weapons, for your engines, and for your auxiliary. You're going to get a plus 62.5 to that energy pool, and that's this pool down here on the bottom. It also will raise the cap in that pool by plus 10. So if you're running an energy weapons build, you're probably already going to have it maxed out like I do here, and we're at 125, I believe, on this build. This build's kind of incomplete. I put it here because I think the ship looks nice, but that's going to bump that up to 135. It's not a massive boost, but when I test it out, we're getting about an extra 200 damage to that particular damage type on the weapon. If you are running a science build, you're going to have your auxiliary maxed out, and you're going to be able to utilize this along with those abilities. So you'll get an extra 10 when you run this to that energy pool of auxiliary, but at the same time, you're also going to get more engines, so that's always going to move your ship around, or it's going to move your ship around much faster, which is really nice. This synergizes with the Awani console, like we had talked about, and we'll cover this a little bit more in detail here, but it synergizes with this particular console, which I covered in the last video, because it scales off auxiliary. Now, there's a lot of different consoles, traits, things like that in the game that are going to scale off of these different energy pools here. And so synergizing this console with that is going to give you even more benefit out of this particular console when you use it in conjunction with other things like that. So for instance, with the Awani console, by using the induction coil, I don't want to keep saying console, but I guess that's what the video is about, so it's going to keep coming out like that. It just feels weird. If you use it with the Awani console, it's going to massively increase the amount of fire cycle haste from it. There's other consoles and other traits in the game, again, that are going to benefit from having that extra energy in those energy pools. And so you'll want to make sure you're timing those out where you're using this console along with those other abilities to boost it up. I wanted to put this on here. It's not a game breaker or, a meta console, but it's really useful, and I'm finding that I'm using it on a lot of my builds. It doesn't break the builds if you don't have it. It just really gives you the ability to kind of maximize those other things that do draw from your subsystem power there. So that's number one on the list. Again, budget side, because you can get this for free. Next, we have the M6 computer, and this is going to come off of the Temporal Escort. And this is a ship that you can buy for Lobi. It is, I think, base price 75,000 Lobi, and you can get a discount on that depending on if your fleet has the discount unlocked. And the reason this is a nice console is when you click it, you're going to get 15 seconds of 15% bonus all damage. So technically, you could use this on pretty much any type of build that does damage, which is basically every type of build unless it's a debuff support or something like that. You're also going to get 25% cooldown reduction for your tactical bridge officers, and you're also going to get a 20% fire cycle haste for all weapons, which is pretty darn good. And up until the release of the 14th anniversary, it was really kind of one of the best. It wasn't the best, but it was one of the best in terms of giving you that fire cycle haste. You do get some accuracy rating and defense rating on here, but unless you're doing PvP, those stats don't really make a big difference for you. So again, budget console, available to pretty much any player if you grind out the dill, and it's a nice console. On my main account, I do find that I'm replacing it with some other things, but on all my free-to-plays, I'm using it quite a bit, and it's certainly worth slotting there. All right, let's move to number 3. These aren't necessarily in order by best to worst or how you'd want to put it. I guess I put it in order of kind of the usability for myself. But our next one is going to be the Adaptive Emergency Systems. This is going to come off of the Sojourner. It's one of the Odyssey classes. It's the Operations variant. You can also get this console off of the Odyssey that comes in the Legendary 10th Anniversary bundle. That bundle's really good. There's quite a bit of stuff that's in there. In fact, this console and the next console, you can get both of them off that Odyssey if you pick up the 10th Anniversary bundle. It is a little bit pricey, though, so I understand if you don't. It's one of the only bundles I actually ever bought. The reason this console is good is you're going to get plus 19 to energy damage resistance, so that's nice to have. You're going to get some hull cap. But the big one here, again, is the clicky, which is what this is focused around, and this is going to give you damage and damage resistance buffs. So you're going to get a plus 50 bonus all damage resistance for 30 seconds. And the wording on this is a little confusing to me, only because normally bonus is associated with like a Cat 2 damage boost. I don't know if that translates when we're talking about resistance, because if they just had plus 50 all damage resistance, as far as I know, those two things are the same. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe there is different categories of scaling for damage resistance. Let me know in the comments if you guys have an answer to that. But either way, plus 50 is a lot for that stat, even if it's not quote-unquote bonus. You're going to get that for the 30 seconds. And the big one here is going to be 30% bonus all damage for 30 seconds, which is going to be usable across the board. If you're using a Torp build, Science build, whatever the build is, it's going to increase the damage of whatever the output is that you're doing. And that effect will double by 50% when you're below half hull. So plus 50% would be, what, another 15%. So you'd be at 45% bonus all damage for 30 seconds, which is a lot of bonus damage. So it's Cat 2. That's going to scale after all of your Cat 1 buffs and is a big boost there to have to your damage output. All right, let's move on to the next console. This is going to come off another Odyssey variant. I believe that is going to be, it's not the Sojourner, is it? Sorry, I got my wiki page up here. I can't remember all of these. This is going to come off the Endeavor Tactical Star Cruiser variant. So if you just want to get it by itself, or again, if you pick up the 10th Anniversary bundle, you get all of the consoles that come from all of the different variants of the Odyssey. This is the flagship tactical computer, and this synergizes really nice with energy builds. Number one, because it's boosting energy builds or energy weapons, directed energy weapons, which will cover beams or cannons, and you're going to get a plus 19%. That's a Cat 1 boost, so not too bad. When you click the console, you're going to get a 33% fire cycle haste for all energy weapons for 15 seconds, which is very nice. You're going to get turn rate strength of plus 50% and flight speed of plus 50%. So very nice to have. Let's take a look. I didn't even think about this, but these two actually create a set bonus, and I'm not even sure what that set bonus is. Let's take a look here. So 2-piece set bonus is going to give us plus 2% crit chance, which is a little bit low. I wouldn't put these two on here like for this unless those two items are synergizing your build. So for instance, if you're running a Science build, the second console there isn't going to do really anything for your Science build. So it wouldn't be worth putting the second console on just for the plus 2% on crit chance. There's a lot of other ways to be able to pick that up without giving out a console slot. But if you were running an energy weapons build, that might make sense to use both of these, unless, I don't know, you have all these other consoles then I probably wouldn't use those, because some of these later ones kind of outclass a little bit, and you might find yourself with not enough room to put them both. So I wouldn't chase the sets here just for that crit chance. But if this is one of the only, like, you only have the 10th anniversary and you don't have a lot of other stuff, using both of these consoles on an energy weapon build is going to be very, very good, and you have the added bonus of getting that 2-set bonus from it. All right, let's talk about the next console. This is the Agony Redistributor. It comes from the Adamant, which came from the, was it last year's 13th anniversary, I believe, Terran ships. The time's flying by, so it's hard to keep up. But it's basically the Terran variant of the Defiant. I kind of went back and forth of whether or not I wanted to put this on. This was nerfed and then buffed and then nerfed. It's in a pretty good spot, I think, now, but it is somewhat circumstance specific, right? So you really, if you want to get the most out of this, you really have to use it in a kind of a particular way. So let's talk about the console here. So it's going to give us a +10 to our inertia rating, and it's going to give us some flight speed. Both are nice to have, but again, we're here for the clicky. So what this is going to do, you're going to select a target, and you're going to click this, and each second for up to 12 seconds, the amount of hull depletion from the target is stored. Each second, deal phaser damage equivalent to 33% of the stored value, ignore shields and half resistance to up to 10 foes within 5 kilometers of the target. So there's another ability that does something kind of similar to this, and let's just take a look here at what that is, because if you're familiar with that, that'll make this make even more sense. Let me see if I can find someone that's got it here. It is a temporal ability. And it might be one of the bigger ones. Let's see here. Recursive shearing. So it does something similar to recursive shearing, except for it affects more targets and it's going to do a lot more damage, but you are going to use it in a similar kind of way. So where this is really going to shine is if you are, say, targeting a larger target. So the longer or the more hit points, the bigger the target is, the more damage it can store that it's going to, spill out to everybody else. You also are going to want to make sure that you're using this in conjunction with, a quote-unquote alpha strike, right? So let's say it's a larger hit point target, a boss, and you have it targeted, and you start buffing up. Maybe you have DPRM or some fire cycle, or you're using it's a tort build, whatever it may be, and you want to get the most out of this. You're going to need to put as much damage in at that time. So you're going into a large boss target, you're buffing up, you're putting the Agony Redistributor on it, and then you're hitting it super hard. And on top of that, you need at least a few other ships to be around it to make it worth its while, because this console is going to affect the other ships around it, not the main ship that you're targeting. So if you were to put Gravity Well, or someone on your team does, or there's certain TFOs where you just have bulked up bad guys together, the Cure would be a good one. If you targeted, say, the top assimilator, and then you started pounding it super hard, all the little generators underneath would start taking these ticks of damage. And if you're using it in situations like that, this console is excellent. If you're using it, with one target, or one target, it's basically useless, because you're not going to get any of that AoE, so it's not really making any kind of difference. But if you have targets bulked up and you're able to put a good amount of damage into that, you're going to get a lot out of this console. But in terms of the usability scale on this is going to probably be a little bit lower, because the use case is very specific. But if your favorite couple TFOs or whatever it is has that opportunity in it a lot, then this would make sense, and it's going to be best in class for that kind of a scenario. We use it still quite a bit in super high-end runs, but it's, again, very situational depending on the way we're going to run it, or the team composition, those kinds of things. But I did want to put it on there because it's very effective, and but it is very situational. So take that for what it's worth. All right, next we have the Domino. This is going to come off of the Bajoran Interceptor. This comes from a Phoenix Epic token from the Phoenix store, which, with the current event that's running right now, we're all going to get a Phoenix Epic token that we can only use on a ship. And if you do not have any Phoenix store ships, the Bajoran Interceptor would be the one that I would recommend specifically for this console. It also comes with a warp core that completes the 4-piece set that you can get the rest of the pieces from mission drops, which is kind of nice. It's not something I probably would use at this point. If I had a brand new character with no reclaimables, I probably would for a little bit. But the ship itself is pretty decent as well. I built it out the other day just to see how it stacks up, in today's current state of the game, and it did very well. So it's a good ship. So if you're a new player and you just don't have, much, the ship is good to have, and the console is one of the best consoles in the game. Let's talk about why. The passives on this are going to give you a plus 15% phaser damage. You're also going to get a plus 20 to your accuracy. But again, the clicky, which is what we're looking for 10 seconds, you're going to get 25% fire cycle haste. For all your energy weapons, you're going to get 25% bonus all damage, and you're going to get 25% recharge speed to your bridge officer abilities. You're going to get 100% recharge speed for torpedo weapons. That's a lot of recharge, and it's a lot of fire cycle haste. And it should sound somewhat familiar because the M6 computer is kind of the Domino Light, if you will. So kind of the very free version that you can get, which obviously you can now get the Domino free as well if you're running the current event. But basically it's a scaled up version of the M6, or the M6 is a scaled down version of the Domino. This synergizes best with phasers only because you get that 15%, but that's not a huge boost. So if you are running, plasma or something else, this is still very worth running, regardless of the energy type that you have, because of that fire cycle haste, which is huge, and the 25% bonus all damage. Fire cycle haste is how fast your weapons are firing. So at 100%, your weapons are going to fire twice as fast. And without getting to, the weeds, that's essentially twice the damage if you're firing twice as fast. So when you click this console, you're going to get 25% increase in that speed, plus a 25% Cat 2 bonus damage. So those two things mixed together is just huge, and is usable on any kind of energy weapons build, beam, or cannons. Highly recommend that. It's a good one, especially with this current event that we have coming, where everybody's going to have access to a Epic Phoenix token. All right, next one. This one's an interesting one. I'm finding I'm using it kind of on everything. Let's start with what we get from this. So we're going to get a plus 15.8% to phaser damage, which is okay. We are going to get a 43.8% Starship shield penetration, which is actually pretty nice. So this is going to be, it's kind of like a damage resistance debuff, kind of. It just cuts through, shield, so you have less to get through it. But again, the clicky is the big one. So 90-degree target arc. So the front of your ship, 90-degree arc on it. It is going to basically fire a lance, phaser lance. There's some ships that have these built in innately. Like the Future Enterprise D has one on it. Some of the Terran ships have them on it. This ship is currently built for phaser, so we're getting a pretty good boost to it. So each shot is going to do 22,643 phaser damage, which is a good amount. It scales obviously off of your phaser, so it obviously synergizes really good with that. But what's really awesome about this console is that it has 6 charges on it. So you can click it, and a couple seconds later, you can click it again. A couple seconds later, you can click it again. Basically, you can fire it 6 times fairly quickly, or I'm sorry, once every 20 seconds, right? And so it's 20-second recharge, and it has a, I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind here. It's a 5-second recharge in between clicks, and it's 20 seconds to refill each of the charges. So if you're spacing it out, you can basically fire it almost every 5 seconds, and you're going to continue to get that recharge every 20. So if you do the math out, basically, if you exactly time it every 5 seconds, you can fire it indefinitely every 5 seconds. So the console by itself does very, very well. If you're running a phaser build, the console by itself is excellent, and it's generally up near the top of the damage performers on pretty much any of the parses that I pull. And if you don't know, if you're newer, parses, it's, I don't know what the acronym means, but it basically is your damage output stats. We use programs where we can see exactly what weapons are doing what damage and how much, and it goes through all the different specs of whatever just happened in the match you were in before, mission or combat. I'll put a link in the description. I have a whole video if you're interested in getting a parser software put up. Let me know in the comments. I know I can just look it up, but what does parser stand for? Anyway, so it does quite a good amount of damage, but it synergizes amazing with one of the best traits in the game. And let's just take a look at that. I slotted it on the ship here. So it's universal design. So each time you activate a universal console, your ship gains a boost to universal critical hit chance and severity. Okay, so every time that I activate any universal console, we're going to get plus 2% to critical chance, and we're going to get plus 10 to critical severity. This lasts for 20 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. So when this is fully stacked up, we're going to get plus 10% to critical chance, and we're going to get a plus 50% to critical severity. That is huge. And this console here that we're discussing, emulating Phaser Lance, will keep that trait up 100% of the time. So what I generally do is I put this on my spam bar, and every 5 seconds or so, it fires and refreshes or continues to stack this. So within... Well, this has 5 stacks. This fires every 5 seconds on my spam bar. So after 25 seconds of being in combat, I have the full stacks of Universal Designs giving me 10% critical chance and 50% extra critical severity. But those are huge, huge numbers, okay? And I'm being able to stack it with a console that by itself does a lot of damage. And so you can see how these two things just synergize together just amazingly. I have another charge in it after the 5 that's going to refresh this 5 seconds later for another 20 seconds, and then every 5 seconds this console's recharging again. So you can see how this console was really made for Universal Designs. I'm sure it was unintentional, but it synergizes with it perfect. It's got the right amount of charges for the right amount of stacks of this trait. These two things together are really a game changer for your builds. I mean, being able to innately, just by firing off this console, have that much crit chance and crit severity added, along with the console doing tremendous amounts of damage, makes it awesome. And this is where we get into, for this console, is that this is worth using on pretty much any kind of build. I'm using it on my science build. I'm using it on my torpedo builds. I'm using it on, heavy tanks. I'm using it on everything with Universal Designs. Now, if I didn't have Universal Designs on some other characters, which I don't, I would be a little bit more picky about what I'm using this on. I probably would only use it on phaser builds. But if you have Universal Designs comes from, I believe it's Lockbox. It comes from the Crossfield Refit. It might be promo. I grabbed it on my free-to-play from the last year's event, but it's definitely worth getting. This console paired with this is amazing. This console comes from the Deimos Pilot Destroyer, which is a Lockbox ship. So I forgot to mention that when we first started talking about it. So on my free-to-play, I ended up grabbing the Universal Designs, and then I had the Pavo crystals, which, if you don't know what those are, you don't have them, and it doesn't matter. They came from an event. If you do have them, they don't do anywhere near the kind of damage as the Phaser Lance, but it has a similar kind of mechanic where they have a certain amount of charges that you can deploy them fairly often. And so that would be your next kind of budget option if you have the Pavo crystals. I think they did add them to the Mud store, but they're kind of expensive, and for the price, I mean, you're probably better off trying to get a hold of the Phaser Lance instead of it. But that would be an option. I'm kind of getting off track here, but that would be an option to be able to proc Universal Designs, is using the Pavo crystals. Or on science builds, you do use a lot of Universal consoles, but once you use them, most of them have, a 2-minute cooldown, maybe up to 1 minute, depending on, if you're using unconventional systems. So the emulating Phaser Lance is the console for Universal Designs, and those two things paired together are probably the best pairing in the entire game, in terms of the amount of damage output that you can get from it and how well they work together and the utility to it. So being able to use it just kind of across the board with any kind of build makes it very, very good. Let's move on to the next. This is going to be the Dynamic Power redistributor module, or the DPRM as it's also known. This console is fairly old, and it's really held its place as being one of the top consoles in the game. For a long time, it was considered to be the top console in the game. And let's look at why that is. So we'll start with the passives, or let's start with where this comes from. So this is going to come from the Atlas Prototype Dreadnought. It's a lockbox ship, so you can get it from the event campaign, or if you have lockboxes, you can Infinity lockbox, you can grab it from there. The passives are going to be a plus 11.3% all damage resistance rating, which is okay. We're going to get a plus 19% directed energy weapon damage, which is a nice boost. It's Cat 1. It's not huge, but it's nice. It's going to synergize with any kind of energy type, so that's good. The activatable on it is where the magic is, like with the rest of these, and that is going to give us, when we click it for 20 seconds, plus 40% bonus all damage. And this is while you're above 80% hull. So if you're dying or close to, you are not going to get this boost. But if we look at the rest of this, at the same time, it's going to give us a plus bonus damage resistance. There's a bonus damage resistance rating again. Let me know, guys, on that. With the bonus damage resistance, is that better than just damage resistance? Anyways. And then lastly, it's going to give us plus 500% hull regen. This console is a basically don't die console when you activate it. There's very few situations where while this is running, you can die. It can happen, like if you were just about dead and those last bits of damage were coming in just as you were clicking it and it wasn't enough just for it to spool up and start getting a couple stacks of that. But other than those kind of rare situations, this will stop you from dying right away and get you to 100% health, which will then kick in the bonus damage output, which is a pretty healthy amount at 40%. So you can use this two different ways. You can use it in an Alpha Strike along with, other consoles, or, just to get a bunch of damage going out. Or if you're about to die and you need an oh shit button, this is the one. So the utility on this is very good because it does two amazing things: stops you from dying and or puts out a ton of extra damage. But again, I remember when I was newer to the game, I was chasing this console. I finally saved up enough to buy it and get the ship off the exchange, and I got it, and I threw it on my build, and there was a very small difference. And this is true with most of these consoles, or pretty much all this. It's true with the game. Just slapping good stuff on the ship isn't good enough. You have to know really kind of how to use it, and maybe we'll put together some guides on how to do that. But the main thing to really kind of look at when you're looking at all of these consoles is stacking them up, right? And if you only have this one, that's fine, okay? So let's say you only have DPRM, or you only have one of any of these. When you go to use that, excluding the case where you're about to die and you need to use the DPRM, but for the rest of them and the DPRM, let's say from a damage, Alpha Strike standpoint, you're going to want to make sure when you get to a place where okay, I'm going to use this because this is a big boss, you're going to want to make sure that, if, like, for instance, if you're on tactical, you're going to use attack pattern Alpha, which is going to give you bunches of bonus damage and, crit chance, crit severity, all of that. You're using your main firing mode, be it fire at will or beam overload or whatever it is. Emergency weapons to power, emergency power to weapons. If your fleets are up, using your fleets, using all of those, and using the DPRM and using any of these other consoles at the same time, that gives you this compounding, accumulating effect. That gives you just a tremendous damage boost, and that's what we mean when we say Alpha Strike. Using them in that way is where you can really get that huge burst damage, especially at towards the end of the match where there's a boss, or at the beginning if there's a big chunk of bad guys. But synergizing that stuff, saving things to kind of spread it out, isn't necessary. It will not give you larger numbers if that's what you're chasing. Now, if you're playing it because you're wanting to manage that and spread it out, and the numbers aren't a big deal, and that's your gameplay, do it. I mean, it works, and if that's how you have fun, that's what we're here for. So do it that way. But if you're looking for higher overall performance and you're chasing numbers, you're going to want to stack that stuff. And regardless is if you're doing that or not, when you get to some of these more difficult harder bosses to kill, stacking this stuff is going to be a lot more effective for you. So kind of a little squirrel moment there going off to the side, but I want to make sure, because like I said, I know when I was newer, I'd hear about these consoles, I'd go get them, and I could barely notice a change on my ship, and that's because I didn't understand stacking things at the same time and really getting that extra benefit out of them. Lastly, let's talk about the Fleet Powered Network Array. I just made a whole video on this, so it's kind of repetitive, but it needed to be in the list. So this is right now one of my favorite consoles for any kind of energy weapon builds, cannons, or beams in any of the firing modes. Passives, it's going to give you a max +5 max auxiliary power. It's also going to give us a plus 24.2 Starship exotic particle generation. Both are okay, depending on the direction you're going to build. The particle generation doesn't really kind of make sense for me on this console because of what the clicky does. I guess, I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to go squirrel again on you guys here. So when we click this, 2 friends up to and up to 12 pets, they control for 35 seconds. You're going to get a plus 50% to 125% directed energy weapon fire cycle haste. Okay, and let's just stop right there for a moment. If you don't have a friend targeted, it affects you. So this is not just a support console. This affects you, and 125% fire cycle haste is insane. That is over. That's hasting your weapons or making them fire twice as fast plus. So even faster than twice. That's twice the damage output when you click this console. And that is going to run for 35 seconds, which is a long time, especially with a 2-minute cooldown. And if you have unconventional systems, which is a personal space trait that'll help cool down universal consoles, you can run this fairly often. And right now, I would argue for anything energy weapon build related, this is the best in slot, hands down. And I'll link it down in the description. I just did a whole video about this with some budget builds and looking at some of the higher end stuff. I'm using this across the board on any build that's energy weapon, low end, high end, doesn't matter. Best in slot right now. The next thing it does, which is kind of less important to me, is every 3 seconds you have a 60% chance to apply one of beams, overload 1, cannons, rapid fire 1, or torpedo high yield salvo 1. So if you have a torpedo on the front, that's kind of nice. You'll get a free high yield 1. We were having a problem with this when it first came out, that it was overriding your main firing mode that you had, and that was kind of a deal breaker, but they did fix that, so that's good. But the amount of fire cycle haste you can get from this when it's fully buffed up is insane. Now let's talk about it being fully buffed up, and I'm just going to briefly cover this because, again, I just made a video covering this in detail. In order to get the most out of this, you need to have your auxiliary power at maximum, essentially. On an energy weapon build like this one that I have, and again, this is kind of barely built here, but if we look at our subsystem powers here, here's normally how I'd run this. I need to be able to get around the map fast, so I need to have my engines up high. So what I would do on this is I would be running this free console you can get from the KDF Recruit, the enhanced induction coil, which we spoke about earlier in the beginning of the video. And let's just go ahead and slot it, because when we do and we activate it, we are going to get a bunch of extra power to all of our subsystems. In the video that I just did, I also utilized, what am I doing? I also utilized auxiliary batteries. So between auxiliary batteries and using the enhanced induction coil, this will max out your auxiliary power. And with the induction coil, it's also maxing out your engines, and you're getting extra to your weapons power as well. So again, like we were just discussing, using these consoles correctly and synergizing them are huge. Let's say you don't have a KDF Recruit yet, so you have to wait till beginning of next year to get it. All you have is the batteries. That's fine. You can use the batteries. You can buy them for free from the vendors. You can also buy batteries from the Dilithium store. I normally get the engines and auxiliary ones here. And what do they give us? They give us plus 75% for 20 seconds, which I think is the same as the auxiliary batteries you can get from the vendors. But when I go to use this, what I would do is click my induction coil. So you can see we're almost at maximum on the aux. Then I would click the battery if I had it, and I'm just kind of pretending I have it here. So I'd click the battery, and that would give me my maximum 135 on the auxiliary power, and then I would click the activatable for the Iwani console. So I'm taking care on these consoles to really understand what they're doing and make sure that I'm getting the most out of them. And sometimes what that requires is a chain of events, right? So in the case of using the Iwani console, we want to get that 125% fire cycle haste, which is huge. So I'm going to want to click my induction coil. I'm going to want to click my auxiliary battery, and then I'm going to click my Iwani console so I can get the maximum out of that. Now, if I wanted to get, just the best I possibly could, let's say I had a few of these consoles that I have on my list here. Let's say I have M6 computer, and let's say that I have the adaptive emergency systems. I would click these two. I would click my battery. I would click the induction coil, and then I would click the Iwani console, because now I have 125% fire cycle haste on top of 30% bonus damage, on top of another 25% fire cycle haste, or 20% fire cycle haste, and another 15% bonus damage. So you're talking 35% bonus damage, Cat 2, and you're talking a total of, 140 fire cycle haste. It's all stacked up together. You can see how that turns into tremendous amounts of damage when you're chaining these abilities together in a way that maximizes, the consoles and using them all together, so you can synergize, these alpha strikes, and some of these, we call it alpha strike, but the Iwani lasts for 35 seconds. In some TFOs, that's a third of the match. Or a quarter of the match, and you can run it twice, so it's running half of the match. I mean, that's a lot. So we say alpha strike, but it's not like alpha in one strike. It's an alpha session, I guess maybe we should say. So make sure, if you're looking at these consoles, you have some of them, really kind of look through them and see how they work, because they're all a little bit different. And the nice thing about this game is, we all have there's a ton of stuff in the game, and we all have a ton of different stuff, right? And so look at what you have, read the tooltips on them, and see, okay, how can these things kind of work together and complement each other? Once you start doing that, that's where you can really excel and have a lot of fun with the builds. I mean, forget about the damage part of it. If we're playing Star Trek online, right? We're Star Trek fans. We like, the complexity and the engineering and the science and all those kinds of things. Figure out how all of these pieces work, and you can come up with your own unique, chains of activatables and things depending on, what you have and what's unique to you that are going to work. You don't have to run all the meta stuff in this game for it to, number one, be good, and obviously to have fun, right? So however you play the game, that's fun to you, you can still do it in a very effective way and have a lot of fun doing it. So that is my top picks for Universal consoles. I hope that was helpful. I know there's a lot of other consoles in the game that are good, and I know I'll get lots of those comments, and I want to hear them. What are you guys using? What's working well for you? What are you having fun with? I pick the ones that I use all the time. So when I make these videos, I don't want to just kind of make stuff up. I guess this is what I'm doing, and that's what I can speak to, and that's it's obviously biased to my play style. But, I try and make sure that, we're at least acknowledging that's not how everybody plays, and that's totally fine. That's good. Everybody should, like I said, play to have fun, and however that happens is good. So let me know what you guys are running. If you guys have questions, we do have a Discord server down in the description, and everyone's welcome. We have about 3,000 members in there. So if you need help, just want to hang out, looking for friends, it's a great place to be. I also have a Epic creator code, so if you decide to buy anything through the Epic store, please use my code. It's free for you guys to use, and it helps me out. I really appreciate that. I think that covers it all, guys. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. Hey guys, appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and sub to the channel for the latest news updates and how-to guides.